Rise with faith, follow the light. Truth will shine through the darkest night. Mercy came, hearts were free. Islam lives through history.
7th century Makkah was a city of deep shadows and fierce loyalties. In the cover of night, tribal leaders frequently gathered to plot against a growing movement that threatened their way of life. To the Quraysh, the Prophet's warnings directly threatened their wealth and authority. Their tribal pride demanded they silence him with a blow that left no room for recovery. Simple insults and mockery were failing to stem his influence. To dismantle his following, the leaders devised a public trap, a test so insurmountable they believed it would discredit him in front of the entire city. Look at the geography of this theater. Hemmed in by rugged mountains with the Kaaba at its center, Makkah acted as a closed, isolated arena. Everyone would see exactly what happened next. The men gathering in the dark weren't searching for divine guidance. They were engineering an execution of character, setting a bar they were absolutely certain no human being could clear. Their challenge was entirely literal. They demanded that the Prophet point to the night sky and physically cleave the moon in half. In their worldview, sorcery and illusions were terrestrial tricks. They believed a man's eyes could be fooled on the ground, but they viewed celestial bodies as being utterly beyond human manipulation. They stood out among the jagged rocks outside the city limits, waiting under the vast Arabian sky for him to fail. But the Prophet didn't back down. Instead of arguing with the mob, he turned away from their taunts, raised his hands, and supplicated directly to his Creator. What began as a local political dispute in a desert town was now escalating into a cosmic trial. The heavens themselves were about to respond. It was the 14th night of the lunar month. The full moon was at its brightest, casting a stark white glow over the expectant crowd as an unnatural silence settled in. Without a sound, the brilliant sphere snapped into two distinct, perfect halves. The pieces drifted apart, hovering independently against the black void of space. The companion, Abdullah bin Masud, was standing there, and he recorded exactly what the crowd saw. The two halves were so widely separated that the massive, dark silhouette of Mount Hira fit perfectly between them. In the overwhelming stillness that followed, the Prophet turned to the awestruck crowd and commanded them, "Bear witness, bear witness." The universe's natural order had physically buckled, leaving behind a manifest proof of prophethood. You would expect the tribal leaders to fall to their knees. Instead, their immediate reaction was panic, followed quickly by denial. They accused Muhammad of casting a massive, overwhelming spell. They scrambled to rationalize the impossible. They argued that his sorcery had temporarily bewildered their eyes, reasoning that such a hallucination could only hold power within the immediate vicinity of Makkah. To prove this theory, they devised a backup plan. They would wait for incoming trade caravans, travelers who had been miles away in the deep desert during the event. When the dusty riders finally arrived at the city outskirts, the Meccan leaders immediately intercepted them, demanding to know what they had seen in the night sky. The answer crushed their theory. The travelers confirmed that they too had looked up from the desert and watched the moon split perfectly in two. The physical evidence was overwhelming, independently corroborated by men who had never even met the Prophet. Yet the tribal leaders actively chose their own desires and pride over a truth they could see with their own eyes. This staggering event, and the stubbornness that followed, was immediately documented by divine revelation. It was immortalized in the opening verses of Surah Al-Qamar, which translates simply to the moon. The chapter begins forcefully. The hour has drawn near, and the moon has been cleft asunder. The physical miracle is tied directly to the urgency of the impending day of judgment. But the very next verse accurately diagnoses the psychological reflex of the deniers. And if they see a sign, they turn away and say, "Passing magic." These verses highlight a tragic irony. They prove that the ultimate barrier to belief is almost never a lack of evidence. The real barrier is a fundamental defect in the receiver's heart. It's easy to look back at ancient Mecca and judge the Quraysh. Today, we frequently demand physical, measurable proof for faith, assuming that seeing a miracle would instantly make us submit. But the men of Mecca prove that seeing is believing is a flawed premise. Visual evidence is completely useless if the internal eye of the heart is already blind. Miracles are given to awaken the soul, but a heart sealed shut by arrogance, by a refusal to give up its own power, cannot be forced open by any external display of physics. So it leaves us with an uncomfortable question. If the sky broke apart before our eyes tonight, would we be humble enough to submit? Or would we too find a way to rationalize it and turn away? The moon had physically yielded that night, but the arrogance of a closed human heart remained completely unyielding.